Pole running somebody else's crew, not as an assistant.
Going to the North Pole?
Well, the same director I was with on Wanted got a job from CBS, which was High Adventure, one of the early series, an hour color film series. And one of them had to do, he was going to take a crew up to the North Pole. He called on me. He said, hey, would you run this thing for me? He knew my background in the ski troops and this and that. He knew what I had done from my $30 a week start to about $800 in those days money coming out, in which I had accomplished a fair amount.
Yeah.
And he said, would you run the whole thing? And I said, you kidding? And he said, no. That was it. I hired the crew, and we went up with 25 people, and we stayed in the Arctic Circle for 6 months and to the North Pole. Oh, we had lots of airplanes, and we didn't do it by hiking and this and that, but it was a good, rugged go, and brought them all back alive. It was a wonderful adventure. I'll tell you one little story because it's really worth it. In this crew, and it was my production, but we had the 5 leading explorers of the early Arctic days who were still alive. Sir Hubert Wilkins, who had gone with Perry, Bernd Balkan. They were 5 very famous people and going. And we brought them all through and got them up to the pole. And our narrator, do you remember her name? Lowell Thomas?
Oh, yeah.
Very famous narrator. Anyway, it was his film. So at the last moment, he flew up and sitting at the North Pole, he's interviewing all these people who had tried themselves. Done deal. We headed for Greenland, and Bernd Balkan said, hey, I just heard that I'm wanted at the South Pole to test some equipment, and would you do the same thing you're doing here for me? We'd like to film it and go directly from here to the South Pole. Well, whoosh! So I called up from Greenland and spoke to my wife, and I said, what do you think? Silence. I hadn't seen my newborn child. We hadn't seen each other for 6 months. I decided against it.
Yeah.
Maybe the only mistake that I really know, thinking all the way back. Could have gone from the north to the south.
You have regrets about not having done that?
Nah, regrets, schmets, you know.
Yeah.
It's a good thing to talk about anyway.
Yeah.
It was good to be home, too.
Yeah, I'll bet it was.
And then from home, we continued on films, and at some point or other, I had had an offer to go to the West Coast, which meant the whole family moving to the West Coast. And we were living very well, still in the village, but no longer a Coldwater Flat or over on Morton Street. We were now living in a penthouse on Lower Fifth. And no crew, nothing, free, make 2 films a year. And hey, it was a pretty good license. Not to steal, it was good work. My wife loved filmmaking. Barbara just loved it. But she also had 3 very young children, 2 and 1 in the basket. And suddenly I knew I didn't want to make films for a lifetime. That I loved the whole thing. I was proud of what I had done, but the hands-on, there was an immediacy that isn't in film, or it's only in a few people, filmmakers, Ingmar Bergman and whatnot, who can combine all the power and the resources with this individual thing. Anyway, I wasn't finding it. And I quit, and we had enough sort of money to get along, and I played chess for 6 months to try to find out. A place called Figaro's in the village, I don't know. You know. And somewhere along the line...
So you literally play chess? I mean,
I played chess for 6 months. I had no idea what I was going to do. We were going broke, but everybody thought, listen, this guy's very successful, he's going to pay, so Gristides and the rent, and everybody was carrying it. And I just played chess but till dawn every day, that kind of chess. And somewhere along the line, at the end of that period, I came home and I had seen somebody sketching, and I had just took some Indy ink, went like this, and said, this is what I want to do. And I can still remember the look of my wife's face. I mean, one child hadn't been born yet, our youngest, our son, Scott. And that was it, and helped me in every way. I took a studio in the East Side, Hungarian section overlooking a cemetery, a fourth floor walk-up, and I painted 18, 20 hours a day.
Did you have any art training?
I'm sorry?
Did you have any art training?
Absolutely none. I couldn't draw a straight line. And I was afraid of being taught. I was still afraid, right back to the school in the beginning, because I had been taught by Barbara, really, and everybody else on films. And here I was, 7 years later, and coming up with, hey, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. I want something more personal. And so I figured I'd better do it myself. New York was the center of art of the world right then. For the first time ever, the excitement in art was tremendous. Mm-hmm. So